ready for story time? Again, we're going from the Blue Fairy book. I'm going to pick a story. And this story, let's pick Little Thumb. Little Thumb is a little guy. A real little guy. And in this story, I might elaborate and I will have some fun things to add to it just as soon as I get my glasses. I got my spare pair. And here's my glasses. I got some glasses. Oh, there you are. I can see you even better. Using my glasses, it seems like everything is more clear. Boy, that helps out a lot. Well, let's get to our story. There was once upon a time a man and his wife, stick makers by trade, who had 7 children, all boys. The eldest was but 10 years old and the youngest only 7. That was 10 boys. I'm sorry. 7 boys. The oldest was 10 and the youngest was 7. 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 3 years to make 7 children. There were a couple sets of twins, I'm supposing. Well, they were very poor, and their 7 children incommoded them greatly. It was hard to take care of all those kids, because not one of them was able to work yet. That would be what they call earning your bread. That which gave them yet more unease was that the youngest boy, he was a very tiny boy, and scarce ever spoke a word. So here's a kid who never spoke. Well, this made other people think that he didn't know much, so he didn't talk much. And that wasn't true. That was just what other people thought. They always thought that talking a lot meant a sign of good sense in children. Well, this little boy was very little. He was born no bigger than the size of a thumb. Very little. Well, this made all the people call him Little Thumb. The poor child got the blame of whatever was done in the house. Guilty or not, he was always blamed. He was always in the wrong, no matter what he could say, so he didn't say much. He was, notwithstanding, more cunning and had a far greater share of wisdom than all his brothers put together, and if he spoke even a little, he heard and thought all the more. There happened now to come a very bad year. This was a year of famine, so great that these poor people resolved that they needed to get rid of the children. They didn't know how. So one evening, when all the children were in bed and the stick maker and his wife were sitting together at the fire, the stick maker said to his wife, with his heart ready to burst in grief, "Do you see? Plainly, plain and simple, we're not able to keep our kids. I can't see them starve to death right here in the house, right before my face. I'm resolved that what we must do is they need to get lost. They need to get lost in the woods. I just can't have them starving to death here at home, at my hand. So what I'm going to do is tomorrow, this can easily be done, because I'm going out. I'm going to be collecting sticks, and they're going to collect sticks with me. Well, we're all going to go collect sticks together. And what we're going to do is we're going to run away and leave them out in the woods when they're not even looking, without their taking any notice. "Oh my goodness!" cried the wife. "Can't you yourself have the heart to take your own children out along with this purpose to lose them?" Well, in vain her husband represented to her this extreme cession of poverty. She would not consent to it. She was indeed poor, but she was their mother. She would not agree to go and lose them in the woods with him. But after much persuasion, and being convinced by him that what a grief it would be to her to see them die with hunger right there in the home, she finally consented. Well, Little Thumb overheard every word that had been spoken, because, observing as he lay in his bed that they were talking very busily, it might have been that point where his mother was protesting, he got up softly and he hid himself under his father's chair so that he could hear what they were saying. Well, they couldn't see very well because they lit their homes with candlelight, and everything around that candle was dark, and there were a lot of shadows. And in those shadows, a really tiny, tiny boy could definitely sneak around. And that's what he did. He was right there under the chair without even being seen at all. Well, he went back to bed again, but he didn't sleep a wink at all for the rest of the night. He was so worried, thinking on what he had to do. He got up early in the morning, and he went to the riverside, where he filled his pockets full of small, little, tiny white pebbles, and then he went home. They all went abroad, but Little Thumb never told his brothers, not one word, not even a syllable of what he knew. They went into a very thick forest, where they could not see one another not even at 10 steps, 10 paces distance. The stick maker began to cut the wood, and the children started to gather up all those sticks and make stick bundles. Their father and mother, seeing them busy at work, ran away from them unnoticed. When they weren't looking, they ran away from them along by the way through the winding bushes. When the children saw that they were alone, they began to cry out for their parents as loud as they could, and no one answered. Little Thumb let them cry on, knowing very well how to get home again as far as he came. He took care to drop along the way the little white pebbles he had in his pocket. So finally he said to them, "Be not afraid, brothers. Father and mother have left us here, but I will lead you home again. Just follow me." Well, they did, and he brought them home by the very same way they came into the forest. They dared not go in, but they all sat themselves down at the door, listening to what the father and mother were talking about. Well, the very moment the stick maker and his wife got home, the lord of the manor had sent them 10 crowns, which he had owed them a long while. They never expected to get this. This gave them new life, for the poor people were almost famished. The stick-maker sent his wife immediately to the butcher's, as it was a long while then since they had even eaten a bit. She bought 3 times as much meat as they needed to feed 2 people. I mean, it would even spoil if, and they just couldn't eat all that. So when they had eaten, the woman said, "Oh, alas, where are our poor children? They would make a good feast with what we have left over. But it was your fault, William, who had a mind to lose them. I told you we should repent of it." What are they now doing in the forest? Alas, dear God, the wolves have probably already eaten them up. You are so inhuman. You've lost our children. Well, the stick-maker grew at least quite out of patience with her repetitive repeating over and over, "Alas, alas." She repeated it probably about 20 times or more. And she kept saying they should repent of it, they should repent of it, they should repent of it, and that she was in the right and he was so wrong for saying such a horrible thing to do to children. He threatened that if she said anything else, he's going to beat her. If she did not hold her tongue, she was going to get a lashing. It was not that the stick-maker was not perhaps more upset about what he had done than his wife, but she kept going on and on and on and on and on and telling him he was wrong, and that it was almost like it was getting to be a humor of great many others who love wives who speak well but think those unfortunate who are continually doing so. She was half drowned in tears, crying out, "Alas, where are my children now, my poor children?" She spoke this so loudly that the children who were at the gate began to cry out all together, "Here we are! Here we are!" She ran out immediately to open the door, and she started hugging them. "Oh, I'm so glad to see you, my dear children. You are very hungry and weary, and my poor Peter, oh, thou art horribly bemired. Come in and let me clean you." Now you need to know in this part of the story that Peter, he was the eldest son. She loved him most of all, more than all the rest, because he was somewhat carroty, as she herself was. They sat down to supper and ate with such a good appetite it pleased their mother and father to see them finish off all the food. Well, whom they acquainted how frightened they were in the forest while they were eating. Speaking almost always all together, the good folks were extremely glad to see their children once more at home. Well, the joy continued while the 10 crowns lasted, but when the money was gone, they fell again into their former unease, and they resolved again to lose them again, and that they might be the surer, much more sure of doing it, to carry them to a much greater distance than before. Well, they could not talk of this so secretly, but they were overheard by Little Thumb, who made account to get out of this difficulty as well as the former. But when he got up very early in the morning, very betimes in the morning, to go and pick up some little white pebbles, he was very disappointed, because he found that the house door was double locked from the inside, and he was at a stand on what to do. He couldn't think of what to do. So when their father had given each of them a piece of bread for breakfast, he fancied he might use this bread instead of pebbles by throwing it in little bits along the way while they pass. So he put it in his pocket instead of eating the bread. Their father and mother brought them into the thickest, most obscure part of the forest, when stealing away into a bypath, they there left them. Little Thumb was not very uneasy, for he thought he could easily find the way back again by means of this bread, which he had scattered and crumbled all along the way as he came. But he was very much surprised when he could not find so much as one crumb. The birds had come and eaten it all up. Every bit of it. They were now in great affliction, all of them, for the further they went, the more they were out of their way, the more lost they became, and were more and more bewildered in the forest, completely losing their boundaries. They just lost their direction completely. Night now came on, and there arose a terrible high wind. This made them dreadfully afraid. They fancied that they heard every side of them the howling of wolves coming to eat them up. They scarce dared to speak or turn their heads. After this it rained very hard, which wet them to the skin. Their feet slipped at every step they took. They fell into the mire, the mud, and it was sticky. It kind of got their feet stuck. While they got up in a very sad state, their hands were just benumbed. Everything was there. Cold, it's windy, they're covered in mud. Little Thumb climbed up to the top of a tree to see if he could discover anything, and having turned his head about to look on every side, in every direction, he saw at last a glimmering light, like that of a candle, but a long way away in the forest. So he climbed down, and when he was on the ground he could see it no more, which made him pretty sad. But having walked for some time with his brothers towards that direction where they had seen the light, he finally saw it again as he came out of the woods. They came at last to the house where this candle was, not without an abundance of fear, but very often they lost sight of it, which happened every time they came into a bottom, the lower side of the hill or valley. They knocked at the door, and a good woman came and opened it. She asked them what they would have. Little Thumb told her, "We are very poor children who had been lost in the forest and desired to lodge there for God's sake." The woman, seeing them so very pretty, began to weep and said, oh dear, alas, poor babies, whither are you come? Do you know that this house belongs to a cruel ogre who eats little children?" Dear madame," answered Little Thumb, "what shall we do? To be sure the wolves from the forest will devour us tonight if you don't let us stay here, and we would rather the gentleman eat us, and perhaps he might take pity on us, especially if you beg it of him." Well, the ogre's wife, who believed she could conceal them till morning at least, let them come in, and brought them to warm themselves by a good fire, for there was a whole sheep on the spit roasting for the ogre's supper. As they began to get a little warmer, they heard 3 or 4 great knocks on the door. This was the ogre, and he was coming home. Upon this, she quickly hurried them under the bed and went to open the door. The ogre pleasantly asked if supper was ready and wine was drawn, and then he sat himself down to the table. The sheep was yet all still raw and bloody, but he liked that better. Well, he sniffed about. "I smell fresh meat." What you smell," said the wife, "must be the calf in which I have just now killed." "Oh, no, I smell fresh meat, I tell thee once more," replied the ogre, looking crossly at his wife. "And there is something here which I do not understand." As he spoke these words, he got up from the table, and he went directly to the bed. "Aha!" he said. "I see them. How would you cheat me, you cursed woman? I know not why I do not eat you up too, but it is well for you that you're a tough old carrion. Here's good game, which comes very lucky to entertain 3 ogres of my acquaintance who are to pay me a visit in a day or 2. With that he dragged them out from under the bed one by one. The poor children fell on their knees and begged his pardon, But they had to do with one of the most cruel ogres in the world, who, far from having any pity on them, had already devoured them with his eyes. He told his wife that they would be delicate eating when tossed up with a good savory sauce. He then took a great knife and, coming up to these poor children, whetted it on a whetting stone, which he held in his left hand. He had already taken hold of them when his wife said to him, "Wait! Why do you need to do it now? Is it not time enough tomorrow?" "Hold your prating," said the ogre. "They will eat the tenderer." "Wait, but you have so much meat already," replied his wife. "You have no occasion. Here's a calf, 2 sheep, and half a dog." "Well, this is true," said the ogre. "Give them a plenty of food that they might not fall away, and fatten them up and put them to bed." The good woman was overjoyed, gave them some good supper, but they were so afraid they couldn't eat not one bite. As for the ogre, he sat down again. He drank, and being highly pleased, he had gotten to withdraw a wherewithal to treat his friends. He drank a dozen more glasses than ordinary, which got to his head and obliged him to go to bed. The ogre had 7 daughters, all little children, and these young ogresses had all of them very fine complexions because they used to eat fresh meat like their father, but they had little gray eyes, quite round, and hooked noses, very long, sharp teeth standing at a good distance from each other. They were not as yet over and above mischievous, but they had promised very fair for it, for they had already bitten little children for their blood. Well, they had all been put to bed early, all of the little ogresses, with every one a crown of gold upon her head. There was in the same chamber a bed like the bigness, and it like the bed of like bigness, and it was into this bed the ogre's wife put the 7 little boys, after which she went to bed herself. Little Thumb, who had observed the ogress's daughters had crowns of gold upon their heads, and he was afraid lest the ogre should repent not killing them, got up about midnight. He took his brother's bonnets and his own, and went very softly and put them on the heads of the 7 little ogresses, after having taken off their crowns of gold. And then he took the crowns and put them on his own head and his brother's heads, that the ogre might take them for his daughters, and his daughters for the little boys who he wanted to kill. All happened according to his desire, for the ogre, waking about midnight, and sorry that he had deferred till morning that which might be done that night, threw himself hastily out of bed, taking his great knife. "Let us see," said he, "how our little rogues do, and not to make 2 jobs of the matter." Then he went up, grabbing all the way to his daughter's chamber, and coming to the bed where the little boys lay, and these were every soul of them fast asleep except little Thumb, who was terribly afraid when he found the ogre fumbling about his head, as he had done about his brothers. Well, the ogre, feeling the golden crowns, said, "Oh, I should have made a fine pencil work of it, truly. I find I drank too much last night." Then he went to the bed where the little girls lay, and having found the boys' bonnets, "Ah," said he, "my merry lads, are you there? Let us work as we ought." And saying these words, without more ado, he cut the throats of all of his 7 daughters. Well pleased with what he had done, not knowing what he had really done, he went to bed again, still drunk from all that wine. As soon as little Thumb heard the ogre snore, he waked his brothers and bade them to put on their clothes and follow him. They stole down softly into the garden and got over the wall. They kept running all night without knowing which way they were going. The ogre, in the morning, when he woke up, he said to his wife, "Go on upstairs and dress those young rascals who came here last night." Oh, the ogress was very much surprised at this goodness of her husband, not dreaming after what manner she should dress them. He was meaning dress them with a sauce, not dress them with clothing. Well, she thought that she had been ordered to go up there and put on their clothes. Well, she went up, and she was strangely astonished when she perceived her 7 daughters killed and weltering in their blood. The ogre, fearing his wife would be too long in doing what he had ordered, went up there himself to help her. He was no less amazed than his wife at this frightful spectacle. "Ah! What have I done?" he cried. "The wretches will pay for this!" And he instantly grabbed, "Give me quickly the boots of 7 leagues, that I can go and catch them." He went out, and having run over a vast deal of ground, both on this side and that, he came at last to the very road where the poor children were, and not above 100 paces from their father's house. They espied the ogre, who went at the top step from the mountain to mountain, over the rivers as easily as the narrowest kennels. Little Thumb, seeing a hollow rock near a place where they were, made his brothers hide themselves in it, and crowded into it himself, minding always what would become of the ogre. The ogre, who found himself much tired with his long and fruitless journey, for these boots of 7 leagues was greatly fatigued the wearer. He had a great mind to rest himself. By chance he went to sit down on the rock where the little boys actually were hiding. As he was very weary, he fell asleep, and after sleeping some time began to snore so frightfully that the poor children were no less afraid of him than when he held up his great knife about to cut his throats. Little Thumb was not so much afraid as his brothers. He told them what they should do. They should run immediately towards their home while the ogre was asleep so soundly that they should not be in any pain about him. They took his advice, and they got home safely. Little Thumb came up to the ogre, pulled off his boots very gently, and put them on his own legs. The boots were very long and large, but this was fairy magic. They had the gift of becoming big or little, according to the legs of the wearer, the person who wore them. So they fitted his feet and legs as well as if they had been made on purpose for him. He went immediately to the ogre's house, where he saw his wife crying bitterly for the loss of their murdered daughters. "Your husband," said Little Thumb, "is in a very great danger, being taken by a gang of thieves who have sworn to kill him if he does not give them all his gold and silver." The very moment they held their daggers at his throat, they perceived me and desired me to come and tell you the condition he is in, and that you should give me whatsoever he has of value without retaining any one thing, for otherwise they will kill him without mercy. And as his case is very pressing, he desired me to make the more haste to show you that I do not impose upon you. That's why he gave me these boots. Well, the good woman, being sadly frightened, gave him all she had, for this ogre was a very good husband. Though he used to eat up little children, he was good to her. Well, Little Thumb, having got all the ogre's money, came home to his father's house, where he was received with great joy. There are many people who do not agree in this circumstance, and pretend that Little Thumb never robbed the ogre at all, and that he only thought he might very justly and with a safe conscience take off his boots of 7 leagues, because he made no other use of them but to run after little children. These folks affirm that they were very well assured of this, and the more as having drunk and eaten often as at the stick-maker's house. Well, they shared some food with other people too. They say that when Little Thumb had taken off the ogre's boots, he went to court, where he was informed that they were very much in pain about a certain army, which was 200 leagues off, and the success of a battle. He went, they say, to the king, and told him that if he desired it, he would bring him news from the army before night. The king promised him a great sum of money upon the condition. Little Thumb was as good as his word, and returned that very same night with the news, and this first expedition, causing him to be known as, well known, he got whatever he pleased, for the king paid him very well for carrying out his orders to the army. After having for some time carried on the business of a messenger and gained thereby great wealth, he went home to his father, where it was impossible to express the joy they were all at his return. He made the whole family very comfortable, bought places for his father, his brothers, and by that means settled them all very handsomely in the world, and in the meantime made himself famous at court. The end.